information with you today. And I have a lot of animations built into the slides, so I apologize to Bill Miller in advance for having to get an arm cramp pushing the button for me, but let's go ahead and advance the slide. The topics I want to cover today include why do we monitor? I want to give you a regional context from a fledgling effort called the Midwest Landbird Migration Monitoring Network. And then I'll move into some key considerations for monitoring, no matter what monitoring you're doing. And move into some examples of protocols or approaches that can be used to monitor migratory bird use of stopover sites, evaluating the success of your habitat restoration, and then some closing thoughts. And this talk is going to focus on land birds primarily. There's a new effort that is just about ready to transition from pilot to operational called the Integrated Waterbird Management and Monitoring Initiative. And it's an attempt to link decision makers at local scales with regional population biologists and people setting harvest limits at flyway levels for not only waterfowl, but also water birds and shorebirds. So it's really guiding conservation and availability of resources during the migratory period for those birds across the Atlantic and Mississippi flyways. And they've got a standardized protocol. They're coordinating the monitoring and are developing an online database. So that's a huge project coming online that's really, I think, going to be a premier effort for the conservation of those species during migration. So I'm going to use some examples with land birds. So let's go ahead and move on. So why do we monitor birds? Well, birds are often indicators. Birds have an important ecological role through the plants that they pollinate, the seeds that they disperse, the vast quantities of insects and rodents they consume, and the part that they can play as prey. They also contribute to important human recreational values such as hunting and bird watching. But changes in bird populations can also tell us a story about the health of the environment. Birds are valuable as indicators because they're relatively easy to observe, and there are many different species with diverse habitat requirements for breeding, migrating, and overwintering. And we often use the canary in the coal mine example for assessing the health of an ecosystem by using birds. Next. So one goal of bird monitoring is long-term surveillance of populations. And this helps provide better information on the distributions of birds or their habitat affinities, or to identify threats to their viability. And this first example on the slide comes from the U.S. State of the Birds report. And because of long-term monitoring, we have increased attention being given to and response from the conservation community for birds in arid lands. And there has been a real increase in partnerships, dedicated funding, habitat protection, and potential Endangered Species Act listing for arid land species such as the sage grouse. We can also see where our conservation practices are working, and we can recognize success. This is also from the 2009 State of the Birds report, and as a result of long-term monitoring, we can see that waterfowl habitat conservation in North America can serve as a great example for other conservation challenges, and shows that through synergy planning, collaboration, and persistence, we can conserve and restore wetland habitats for the benefit of both wildlife and future generations. Well, another reason that we monitor birds is to evaluate management, and that's partly what I've been asked to speak about. And we have an extensive body of literature on relating bird communities with habitat management during the breeding season. Less often do we have that during the migratory periods, and I think we had some really great examples in the talks this morning. It was a happy accident that I'm able to tie into all of the other speakers without actually seeing their talks until today. But we've had some really good examples of how we can look at migratory bird use of habitats to guide how we manage them accordingly. Next slide. So again, I got ahead of myself, but this next slide just shows, I think, the Forest Beach area, I hope. I pulled some things off the web here, and what some of these areas look like prior to treatment, and the wonderful people involved in evaluating the effectiveness of those practices in terms of migratory bird populations. So can you think of any other reasons why people might monitor birds? And yes, I'm going to force this to be interactive because it's the last talk and it's late in the afternoon and I'm tired. So, well, we're giving away some of the answers, but really, why else would people monitor birds?
Human health.
Thank you for reading the slide. It was very hard. Good job, Kyle. So one reason is to justify greater support for conservation programs, to guide the purchase of new lands, or to fund private lands efforts. Also, human health and disease. There's two more that pop up here, Bill. To help us craft policies to reduce threats to birds and wildlife, and to help us enforce environmental laws. Okay. So now I'm going to move into the next item on the outline, which is providing a regional perspective. I do work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as a regional migratory bird biologist, and one of my primary duties has been developing and leading the Midwest Coordinated Bird Monitoring Partnership. You can Google us, and there's a website that you can join. Is anybody in this room actually signed on to that website? There should be like more than 2 hands popping up, but all right, good. Excellent. Yes, thanks, Noel. Since 2009, we've been tackling the following 5 objectives, and I'll just have you pop them all up here, throughout the 8-state region. So often monitoring is thought of as an afterthought or something nice to do if you have funding for it. And we're really trying to integrate monitoring into management and conservation. And the example I threw at somebody at lunch was, instead of treating 20,000 acres with your project, 20 acres with your project, treat 18 and use the money that you would have used to treat those 2 acres to monitor and evaluate, and help you be even more effective with your investments in the future. We're also trying to broaden the scope of monitoring for species that are most at risk or for which we lack adequate information. And I would also say expanding out beyond the breeding season and really thinking about birds during the migratory and other non-breeding periods. Not surprisingly, we're trying to coordinate among programs and across spatial scales. We're trying to improve survey design, field methods, and data analysis, and even standardization where possible, so that, as I think Bob said earlier, we can compare apples to apples from site to site. A number of you are nodding heads at that. And also employing modern data management strategies, and I'll speak to that in a little bit. In our early workshops in 2009, we tried to identify what are, not just a laundry list of everything we'd like to monitor, because there's no way we can financially do that, but rather we wanted to identify what are the real conservation challenges, what are the real needs that require regional collaboration or a regional approach. And not surprisingly, conserving the birds during migration and understanding bird migration across the upper Midwest region emerged as a high priority among 8 to 10 others. And you can move to the slide. So just to further illustrate why this is a priority, this is a slide I borrowed from Anna Peterson. She was a doctoral candidate at the University of Minnesota Duluth. And the upper Midwest and Great Lakes region likely plays a very important role in concentrating bird migration and in linking areas of spectacular abundance in the boreal region here, for this black pole warbler example, to areas of high endemism and biodiversity in the tropics. And in some years we will observe a 5 billion bird mass exodus, and these are parents and young that are moving across the landscape. So we have a significant role to play in supporting these birds as they move back and forth during the annual cycle. And I think Dave and others have illustrated that point very well today, so I'll move us along. We have a fledgling Midwest landbird migration monitoring network underway, and this is not new. In Canada, they have a migration monitoring network that links and coordinates sites across the southern portion of Canada. And there's also a group called the, I'm going to forget this now, LAMNA. Landbird, man. I'll get it to y'all later, but LAMNA is I live in acronyms, it gets fuzzy sometimes. But that's another attempt to coordinate and standardize and bring partnerships together to help us understand bird migration. And I'm going to stick on this slide for just a second longer. So we've really had some challenging conversations, I'd say, over the last 2 years, and a number of you in the room have been really have shown tremendous leadership in advancing our thinking as a region. And we have some amazing capacity that I'll show you in a little while to collectively evaluate and understand bird migration. But we wanted to back up and ask ourselves first, why do we want this information? Who are we going to provide this information to? Who's situated to make a difference for birds during migration? And so we came up with 3 overarching objectives that we would develop this network under. And the first of those is that our vision is that we would determine locations and site characteristics of stopover habitat so that land birds migrating gain rather than lose the resources necessary for optimal reproductive success and annual survival. That's a pretty ambitious goal. The second goal is that we really want to better understand how birds are moving across the region, not only through habitats, but through airspace, so that we can effectively address conservation challenges and guide developments such as wind farms, communication towers, and other obstacles. And the third goal of this developing network is just to have an organized network of research and monitoring capacity so that we can mobilize them to address priority information needs as they come about. So where are we at in developing this? So right now we've identified a need to really get somebody to work on this in the short term, and using those objectives and doing an in-depth analysis and reaching out to all of the key partners that are doing migration monitoring, that are doing banding, that are positioned to provide information, identify with our current capacity how well situated are we to address these questions, and where do we have gaps, and where do we need to fill in the missing pieces, and what would a network look like to help us address those three questions. So where in space and time do we need to have people collecting data? And Noel and Bill have developed a proposal, and they are currently seeking funding to working with people across the region to hire a term coordinator to really do this. And I'm hopeful that in the next year or so, pending any funding cuts from sequestration, we can try to get this started. So, that's where we're at in the region. I wish, so as usual, Wisconsin is out ahead of everybody else in the region, and I wish that it was a year from now and I could come in and say, here is the protocol, here is what you need to do to help not only answer your questions locally, but provide information for this bigger context, but we're just not there yet. I will mention that Mark Shieldcastle from Black Swamp Bird Observatory does have a draft framework in place that identifies different levels that stations could participate in, ranging from doing point counts to intermittent banding and point counts to constant effort, daily banding, point counts, etc., to provide information at different levels for some of these types of regional questions. So the third component of my talk is just to get us thinking about some key considerations for monitoring, no matter what monitoring you're going out to do. And one of those is, really having the why question answered before you ever set out to collect data. Why are you monitoring? Without knowing the reasons for conducting a survey or the desired type of information gained, it's really difficult to determine what, how, where, and when to survey. So this resource that I provided here, don't be dissuaded by the word Northeast. This is an incredible resource that works, it provides guidance no matter where you are doing bird monitoring. It's a 10-steps handbook. Mine is so torn, I've used it so much, but I've got free copies available online, or I can send you a PDF. And before I forget, I did bring business cards, so anybody who has follow-up questions or wants copies of the information I'm sharing, feel free to contact me and I'll be happy to send those. But this walks us through 10 steps to have successful bird conservation through improved monitoring. And the first step is have a clear objective. Really think through why you want the information. What is it about the system you want to understand, and who's going to use this information? Next. Then, and we always want to jump to grabbing a protocol and running with it, but then, after you've been really clear about why, then determine whether there's an existing program or protocol that you can become a part of that meets your needs. And it's really important, and I know I have a coordination partnership bias on at all times, but assemble a team and make sure that you include someone with survey design and analytical experience. And there's a great, you have many people that can serve as that resource here in Wisconsin, and I see several of them in the room. They may not want me offering them up as consultants, but Bill Miller and Sumner Madison, Tom Presby, Bob Howe, Noel Cutright. There's lots of people in Wisconsin who have or are connected to people with this kind of expertise, or connected to universities that can help you think through, the worst thing is to go out and survey for 20 years and then go back and throw your data at a statistician and say, okay, analyze these for me. And it turns out you're not able to answer the questions that you wanted answered in the first place. So that little bit of extra time up front, thinking through the design, and I have to reach out to those people too to help me design monitoring programs, really does help you down the road. So, I mentioned the people that you could go to for help, and Andy Polios will probably be out throwing planetary warbler nesting boxes up. So again, you can turn back to folks like Dave and Summer to help you thinking through objectives for how to design a project to monitor bird migration. So again, what needs to be done after you've answered why, when, how, who should do it, who's going to do it? Are you going to rely upon citizen scientists or volunteers? Where and how many sites do you sample? How much will it cost? How will we store and use the data? And I'll come back to that in a minute. And also, and this is so important, who needs to use this information, right? Because in the end, we're trying to learn something. We're trying to help us, be more efficient or effective next time, or see that we had the desired outcome for the species that we were trying to manage for. And without monitoring, it's really difficult to answer that, and then it becomes even more difficult to justify continued investment in these types of programs. So I mentioned modern data management strategies, and I wanted to bring up the Midwest Avian Data Center because I think it can be a tremendous resource to all of you in the room. It is an online web-based portal, and I don't know if we have web access in here, but if we have time later, I could go online and show you what it looks like and how to navigate around. But the Midwest Avian Data Center is a new partner of the Avian Knowledge Network. The Avian Knowledge Network seeks a collaborative approach through efficient data management, coordinated development of useful solutions, and using best science practices based upon the data. And this is right now the Avian Knowledge Network spans North America. It's expanding its presence into South America, and we're also in conversations with some other continental bird organizations for this network. This is what the homepage of the Midwest Avian Data Center looks like. And I'm going to attempt to use this. I've had some coffee, so I'll probably shake around. But so this is what the homepage looks like. This next tab is data collection tools, and this is where we're actively identifying and uploading protocols, so that after you've answered why you want to monitor, then you can look through some protocols that are well tested and recommended. Habitat management is a place where we're making available bird conservation planning and other guidance documents. There's a citizens science tab that advertises active citizen science programs, gets people who want to be involved, who have some ability to identify birds and are willing to follow protocols. This maps page I'll show you in a minute. This is an interactive mapping portal that allows you to interact with and analyze and play with the data. Then there's a special portal called the acronym is awkward. We couldn't have come up with a worse one than WADC. It sounds like a cat coughing up a hairball, which you'll remember now. But the My WADC portal allows you to go in and set up your own project. You can and manage data on your own through this application, and then also the About tool. So let's go ahead. I'm going to show you a few screenshots of some of the functionality that I think might be useful to you. So this first one, let's see. Is that really the first one? Can you just go back a second? Thanks. Okay. So this is, so you've gone, yeah, you're right, the colors are kind of funny here. So the map-based access to avian data summaries, this is the Midwest region, these 8 states. This is the Fish and Wildlife Service region that I work for. And you can choose individual data collections. So, I'm just going to run over here. I have a big mouth. So right now you can interact with data from the Breeding Bird Survey, eBird. If you don't like eBird data, you don't have to work with them. Data from banding stations, and we've got 5 to 10 more data sets coming in right now, and I want to recognize Jim Nickelbein and Bill Mueller and Noel Cutright. They have collaborated on a project to bring in over 1 million bird observation records from long-term studies at several stations throughout Wisconsin and Illinois as part of a project to bring in nearshore bird data. There's also 30 years of data coming in from Black Swamp Bird Observatory. We've got long-term Forest Service data coming. We've got lots of data coming in right now, so it's exciting. But eventually you'll be able to pick from additional data collections, and then you can query them by state, by bird conservation region, by county. We've got important bird areas in there, watersheds. We have the protected areas database, which means you can go in for a specific state park, state natural area, you name national forest, national park, etc. And that's enough for now. And then what I've done on this page is I actually picked a species, and from these 3 data collections, I wanted to show every site that had an observation of a golden wing warbler from June to July. So I'm assuming breeding season. I think this one's a little questionable. Maybe it's an early or late migration observation, but I work for Tom Will, and he's the golden wing warbler guy, or the guru, right? There's that word again, of the Midwest. So this is an example of where you can see data-driven distributions of birds in real-time or historic data. Next slide. We can also produce data-driven checklists for these different areas. So again, this is using that protected areas database. This chooses from, so I clicked on this state park. I had no idea what it was. It's the Lake Maria State Park. I think it's in Minnesota. I can't remember. And basically, it clips out any and all bird observations that occur within that boundary from any of these data collections. It samples from all of them and gives you by year or across all years total documentations of birds among these different studies. And again, because there's a common schema that links up all these different data files, we are using like fields with like fields. And we've got statisticians involved and spatial analysts that are very diligent about making sure that we're not violating some of those rules. And the third screenshot is, oh, this one's cool too. And this one's actually relevant because it's from Door County. Yay. So you can go in and draw your own custom polygon. Well, there's two things I can show you here. One, I arbitrarily drew a polygon around Door County, and it gave me data from 1968 to 2012. I didn't do this yesterday. And it showed, again, gives you just numbers of birds observed from all these data collections within a given site. So a data-driven checklist. It's good to just go and explore what birds have been seen in this area in the last 10 years from the available data sets. So there's a few messages on here. Number one, more data, more complete picture. So sharing data is a good thing. And number two, it allows us to, look for, are there species of greatest conservation need or species of concern being seen here? How, are there certain species I have the opportunity to target? Do they occur in the next county over? And, if so, how can I plan habitat enhancement practices for these species, etc. There's a lot of exploration that you can do and a lot of hypothesis testing or development that you can do from this. The other thing, you'll see this little hand button. So if you click on any one of these dots, or I wish I had the breeding bird surveys up, but they're drowned out by, here's BBS right here. So you can actually just click on one of these sampling units, and it also kicks up all the data from it. So it's a really neat way to interact with and explore large amounts of data in one place. See, I told you it was kind of cool. This is the histogram tool. This is really similar to what you would find in a printed field guide, and we saw this with the eBird example earlier today. So it shows you the temporal distribution of a given species or set of species over the course of a year. And again, this example I chose from all data sets, so you can pick one or the other. I chose 5 different species: black duck, black-throated green warbler, blue-winged teal, eastern meadowlark, solitary sandpiper, and for Door County. And we're going to be expanding this year so that you can query by individual protected areas, by bird conservation regions, or we're even looking to build in where people can upload a custom polygon and query and create histograms using that tool as well. So, and maybe you have data that shows that, black-throated green warblers are actually present in September, or I've had eastern meadowlarks show up as early as May. Well, share your data, and then we can more accurately reflect true bird occurrence over time. And also, I did this for all years, but you can be very selective in the temporal bounds that you put on it as well. I'm sure there'll be questions on this later, but I have to move us along. So, because I'm supposed to talk about monitoring migratory birds. The question of when should I go out and start surveying for my migratory birds? Well, I think there's a lot of great tools that are helping us predict or forecast bird migration, and I live vicariously through all of you right now. I'm stuck in the office most of the time, but I love when Max Henschel, any of you know Max? I think he's in Madison now. He was a U-bird like me. He follows and blogs on radar, and people all over, right, are posting on listservs that radar is lighting up, and tomorrow there's going to be fallout. Birders go to this county and start e-birding, right? So that's part of, let's mobilize our network to get out and document bird migration. So I think that certainly radar and some of these other innovations are helping us understand and predict the timing of migration and when we should be out doing daytime surveys, and also beginning to understand weather patterns associated with migration so we can try to predict when these events might occur. So there's a few overarching reasons, and I think I stole some of these from a presentation Dave gave in August, of why we would monitor some of those potential objectives or questions for monitoring the birds. And these might be objectives that you would go out and do count surveys around. So for example, you want to determine which species are present and in which habitats. Or what's the relative abundance? How many of individual species are we seeing? Or how consistently is a site used during spring and fall migration? Next, please. You're doing great, by the way, Bill. Thank you. So these are a few methods or protocols that I would point you towards or suggest you consider if you want to answer some of those questions. So one is just doing a daily list, and you can use eBird or other ways to manage your data, or also, I think there's a lot of opportunities to get volunteer birders to go out and bird an area and put their observations there for you, and have some capability to at least keep lists of birds that are occurring. There's also been a lot of work done with point counts. Dr. Howe talked about the 10-minute point counts that they've been doing for many years at Point au Sable. There's also a protocol that was developed recently by a PhD student at the University of Minnesota. Her name is Dr. Tanya Humayun, and she had originally developed this for the Twin Cities important bird areas, Twin Cities and Mississippi River IVA. There's a website that you can check out. And for a while, we were talking with National Audubon about them picking up this protocol and using it across their network of IVAs, and that's not happening right now. They've had some reprioritization and staffing changes, but this is it really walks you through sort of how to set up 5-minute point counts, and incorporates detectability and some of the key needs for having good analyses of these data. But basically going out and setting up point counts throughout your unit of interest, and varying it by habitat, and how far apart the points need to be, and for how long, and the data form and everything. And I think it's a really robust method for counting birds. And then also Anna Peterson, who I mentioned earlier, the work that she did up in the North Shore of Lake Superior used a combination of transect surveys. So within some radius some distance on either side, individuals would walk and count all birds detected within 25 meters or however far they're able to identify birds. She also combined that with some counts above the canopy layers. So she actually had people stationed on platforms, and they were counting raptors and passerines moving across, and they were estimating altitude of, what altitude are these birds moving at, and what is some of this early morning movement look like. And I think she's getting ready to publish some of that study, and I don't know if Dave and others know more about it. If there's questions on that, we can try to get those answered for you. But she would be another good resource to contact. She tried to integrate multiple methods to quantify bird migration along the North Shore of Lake Superior, and actually her work has been critical to informing setbacks or buffers, where they're buffers against putting up towers or constructing large obstacles within so many kilometers of the shoreline. So she's had direct effect on migratory bird conservation up there. Next slide. So every once in a while I have to wander into uncharted territory in my talks, and I've done very little to no banding. And I know a number of you are consummate banders in the room, so I'm going to try and not overstep what I know from direct experience. But banding is another excellent way to quantify or understand bird migration, as well as other important features of migratory birds. And I wanted to mention that there are permits required. There's training and certification, and working with the bird banding lab and the North American Bird Banding Council. There's a lot of people that regulate banding, and I think it's lately become a little bit more difficult to get new permits and to sort of justify continued banding at some sites. But through constant effort misnetting, we can certainly get an index of population size and composition of birds that are within the netting area. You can get some really detailed demographic information on age and sex classes. You can compare these annually, seasonally, spatially, and between species. You can also start to identify, quantify, and analyze stopover birds and resident birds. And I'll get into some of these specifically. This is a slide that I borrowed from Mark Shieldcastle, and he did this really neat analysis of, I think these are registered banding stations within the upper Great Lakes region, and he broke them out by the average numbers of birds that they band per year. So it kind of shows you some of our existing capacity to have a network of banding stations, a way to sort of measure demography across the Midwest, and there's some really key areas, right, that, so this, I think, is justification for me to get out in the field more and apprentice on banding, because nobody's banding in the UP. Key areas along the lake shores and river corridors, so certainly there are some gaps in our current network. Next slide. So some of the things that we can look at to assess how well we're providing for birds on Stopover is certainly body condition. And so we can look at wing lengths. We can see through looking at lipids or estimating fat, are birds well fed or are they stretched to their limit on migration? We can look at beak and other deformities, and also through blood samples. There seems to be an increasing interest in looking at contaminants, contamination in birds, and also disease. Some questions such as can birds gain mass at urban sites on migration? Is my site allowing, are birds leaving fatter and happier or leaner and meaner from a site? And some of those types of questions can be facilitated through banding. Also, just tracking age and sex ratios of populations. Are adults migrating before juveniles? Do males move through before females? Do we have a fairly balanced population or a potential bottleneck? Are there enough adults to keep the population growing? So again, really important information to help us look at and increase bird survival and conservation throughout the annual cycle. And I love that graphic that Dave started with, showing the majority of the birds' annual cycle taking place outside of the breeding season. Always important to keep in the back of our minds. And then, which ties into my third point, it helps us establish connectivity among populations. On the right, this is a graphic from a study going on. Pete Morrow from the Smithsonian, Tom Will, and others are mining data from the bird banding lab. So all those people that have been banding birds over time and submitting their data, they're going in and looking at bands and recaptures and starting to connect breeding populations with where they're caught on migration or wintering, and mapping out, helping us start to look at where do our birds that breed in the upper Great Lakes, where do they go and spend their winters, or where are they migrating to, and how can we maximize conservation on the wintering grounds? And it's helping us start to understand, how to set up strong partnerships throughout the annual cycle of the bird. And other folks have mentioned geolocators. This is a graphic from Bridget Stutchberry that I think that's on a wood thrush, and helps us look at, maybe that was a satellite transmitter, I can't remember. It looks a little more exact than it was geolocator, okay. That helps us start to look at, pinpoint where birds are stopping over and their exact migratory paths. And I think that's going to be really important to helping us understand what, just how limiting migration is for birds and where we can focus our limited conservation dollars. Next. So then, I wanted to just offer a few thoughts on evaluating your habitat restoration that's occurring locally. So think about this question. So besides just do we have birds or not, what resources are you providing to birds at any given site? And I think it's really important to evaluate before and after management actions occur so that you can determine if indeed you were successful. And think about what success would look like. Set some benchmarks for yourself. And I think that that makes it harder to throw monitoring out with the bathwater or whatever. So, next slide. So what can you monitor? Well, besides birds, I think measuring food or insect availability. So that is some sort of insect trap there. This is even more outside of my area of expertise. Looking at what sort of fruits are available and the timing of the availability, and are these indeed resources that are going to help birds along the way. I did not know that buckthorn causes diarrhea in birds, so that was very useful knowledge to gain. And yes, that picture on the bottom right is from a coffee plantation, so I know it's not local, but it still illustrates the importance of understanding food availability to birds. Also, I was hoping Eric Wood was going to be speaking here. I know he was at one or both of the preceding workshops, and I saw a presentation by him a few years ago at a WIPSI workshop, and his work was just phenomenal in looking at how the length of petioles and timing of leaf out affects the food supply available to birds as they're migrating. And I think many of you are aware of, or more current than I am on the body of literature looking at phenological mismatches. The timing of bird arrival, and can birds arrive early enough to keep up with leaf out? Are shorter distance migrants more favored to do that than longer distance migrants? And just those gambles that Dave said that birds take when they leave Jamaica and make their way up and hedge their bets that there's actually going to be food for them as they move up to the breeding grounds. So again, there have been studies looking at early leaf out dates and birds arriving earlier as well from long-term monitoring programs. Okay, and predator populations. And this one's kind of obvious to me. why put a lot of time and effort into enhancing stopover habitat when there's a subsidized feral cat colony like right there, or if you have a really vibrant mesopredator population or a subsidized mesopredator population? Like, are you really, just paying attention to or thinking about or knowing, what kind of proximity do you have to some of these practices, and is that really gonna facilitate your efforts to provide high quality migratory bird stopover habitat? So just, maybe some monitoring of your local predator population as well might be informative. So I think I kept this under 45 minutes, at least it feels like. I tried to, because I know it's late in the day. So closing thoughts, I would be remiss if I didn't encourage you to coordinate locally and regionally, work together, work in partnership, contact me. I'm in contact with a lot of individuals across the region, and I'm always happy to help people out. Monitor with a purpose and a design. Have a question in mind. Think about the importance of evaluating and demonstrating to your managers, to your funders, like, yes, I was successful in restoring migratory bird habitat. Use the Midwest Avian Data Center. It's there to help. And if it's not helping you, I want to know that too, so that we can make it better. Think about bird needs during migration. So besides counting birds, think about food availability, phenological events or mismatches in predator populations. And finally, I am immensely impressed with the leadership that's being shown by the people guiding the Wisconsin Stopover Initiative. And I know Dave said this morning. Keep up all the great work, and I'm really excited to see this grow and expand to Lake Superior in the future, and maybe Michigan might pick it up someday. So it's in Ohio and Indiana and Illinois. It's exciting to think about where this effort is going to be in 5 years. So with that, I want to thank several partners that have been really key in guiding our fledgling regional migration monitoring network. So these are just a small section of folks that have been involved in the land bird migration network. And again, we have over 100 organizations working together through the Midwest Coordinated Bird Monitoring Partnership. Pretty much anybody that wants to come to the table, we'll make room. And finally, I've included my contact information on the very last slide. And now you're off the hook, Bill. Wow, that's an interesting color scheme. This is from the Porcupine Mountains, where I think Dave's really good picture was from this morning. It looked like the Lake of the Clouds, maybe. Yeah, some of you are nodding. So anyway, please feel free to contact me, and I'll try to get back to you within 1 week of you emailing me.